ho, ho.
Hey guys, I'm Kimberly from Fat Quarter Shop. Welcome to part 3 of our 2021 Christmas in July event. We're having so much fun. Every Monday we release a free video, so make sure to subscribe to our channel to join the fun. This week we're going to be working on making ribbon blocks, and to add to the fun, we also have a cross stitch that's completely free also. So check out the Fat Quarter Shop Floss Tube channel and you can also stitch along with us. So let's get started on week 3. We're only using 3 fabrics this time, plus the background. Super easy. Put it in your quilting journal, and now we can cut. Let's start by cutting our background. Again, I have my fold at the top, my selvage at the bottom, and I've ironed this part. This part we can just roll up and just keep out of your way as you're cutting. For this row, I've determined that we should do a 3-inch strip, a 2-inch strip, and a 1.5-inch strip. So first, I will put my ruler on the edge and do a straightening cut. That gives me a really nice straight edge before I continue cutting. So from here, I'm going to cut a 3-inch strip, slightly move this, cut a 2-inch strip, and whenever I'm looking at a pattern, I try to just figure out what I need before I start cutting. And of course, if it changes, that's fine, but I like to have a starting point. And then a 1.5-inch strip. And then I'm gonna roll this up and we'll save it for row 4. From here, I'm gonna just move these smaller strips up here. I'm gonna work with my 3-inch strip. Now I've looked at my pattern and I want to use triangle paper for both the C and the J and the C and the M. And that is in this part of the instructions. So for the C, I'm going to cut 2 3-inch squares instead of 2 2.5-inch squares. On the right side, I'm going to just cut a straight edge and then rotate my fabric. From here, I need 2 3-inch squares. I've got a layer of 2, so I will cut the 3 inches, and that will be my fabric C. Then I'm going to cut 3 7.5 wide strips and 3 3.5-inch wide strips, but they're 2.5. So I need to take my strip that's 3 inches and trim it down to 2.5. And when I'm moving my fabric, I'm trying to keep it nice and straight and not have it move. So I'm going to cut the 2.5-inch. Then I'm going to subcut 2 7.5-inch wide pieces. And I hope we get enough, but there's a 7.5, and I don't think we're gonna have enough, so we'll probably have to cut another strip. So from this, we have 3 7.5-inch rectangles, which are my fabric A's, but we need 3 3.5. So I don't think this is gonna be 3.5 inches wide. We can get 1 from here. Actually, we can get 2 from here. And then we'll just need 1 more that's 2.5 by 3.5. So I went to my scraps from the previous month, and I actually have a little bit left over that's 2.5 inches wide. So I'm gonna just subcut this down to 3.5. So now I'm able to get the remaining fabric B from a previous month. And of course, you have plenty of fabric if you wanted to do another strip. So for D, we're gonna cut 4 2 by 4-inch rectangles. And from here, this is already 2 inches. Now you can either cut on this side and rotate, or you can cut on the left side. I'm gonna go ahead and cut from the left side. You'll be cutting towards yourself, so only do this if you're experienced and comfortable doing it. Now I'm gonna cut a 4-inch rectangle twice, and that's going to give me 4 rectangles that are 2 by 4. And just as I go, I am going to add them to my design board. Now we need 8 2-inch squares. So I'm going to actually cut at the 6-inch, the 4-inch, and you'll notice I move my ruler from the right to the left. My fabric doesn't move. If you are going to cut from the left to the right, your ruler would move more. So that's why I do it the way that I do it. These are going to be my fabric E's. And my F's, I need two 1.5 by 6 inch rectangles. I don't have 6 inch here, but I have enough to probably do a little bit from the next strip. So let's see, if I trim this down to 1.5 inches, I can get two of the 1.5 by 2 inch rectangles that we need for fabric G. So you can see as I cut, I just try to make the strips work and just try to get as much as I can out of them, even if you cut out of order. So now we're going to go back and cut two 1.5 by 6 inch rectangles of the fabric F, and we cut this strip 1.5. So you can either cut on the left or the right, getting a straightening line. And if you do that, just rotate as gently as you can. And we're going to subcut that down to 6 inches. And when I'm cutting, I do align my Creative Grids ruler at the top and the side. The reason I use Creative Grids is they are grips on the ruler, and when you move your hand, the ruler does not move once it is on your fabric. Those will be your F's. And then we just need 8 1.5 inch squares. So if I cut a 6 inch strip, now this we can save for another month. Then you can subcut at the 4.5, 3, and 1.5. And that is going to give you your H's. And that is how you cut your background fabric for row 3. Now we're going to move to cutting our bow fabrics. And if you look at I through K and L through N, they're actually cut exactly the same. But on J and M, we're going to cut one 3 inch square instead of a 2.5, so that we can use triangles on a roll paper. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that first. Just cut it from a corner. And that is going to be one of our J's and one of our M's. So I'll set that aside and label it J and M. And when I'm done, I can divide those out by color. Now from here, I need 7 2.5 inch squares. So I'm going to do a straightening cut here. I'm using the Perfect 10 ruler because this pattern just uses very simple measurements, and this ruler only has 1/2 inch lines, and that's what we need. So I'm going to cut across at the 5 inch first, and we're going to try to get as many 2.5 inch strips from this. So I'm going to move this down, straighten the right edge, and then just make sure when you're cutting that you cut through both layers. And I think we're going to get 4 from this. And then we'll just set this aside. So from here, you subcut into 4 2.5 inch squares. So since I moved that, I'm going to go ahead and cut those separately just because it moved, so it's more accurate. 2.5 and 2.5. And we can label these in a little bit. And we do need 3 more 2.5 inch squares. So I'm going to cut right here a 2.5 inch strip. And then we're going to subcut this into 3 2.5 inch squares. So using a rotating mat really helps because your fabric stays in place. And from here you can actually cut 7.5, 5, and 2.5. And those will be the remaining J and M's. Now we need 2 1.5 by 2 inch rectangles. So I'm just going to cut that from here, where my ruler's lined up here, and then I've done a straightening line, and then I can save this for another block. I'm going to cut 2 inches first, and then I'm going to subcut 3 inches first. I always cut my larger piece first, and then subcut down into my 1.5. And those will be my K and N. So after I've cut, I am going to divide them by color. So this will be K, and this will be N. And it's important to keep these fabrics separate since we have written this pattern with 2 different bow colors. So for your I's and your L's, we're going to come back over here and divide these out. And this will be your I, and this will be your L. And from here, we'll have a bigger and a smaller. and these will be your J and your M's. So just take the time to cut and label your fabrics properly, and we do have the O and the P still to cut. So this fabric is directional, and if you look at your pattern, you can either do your stripes horizontally or vertically, and we have them vertical because we think that looks more like a bunting. So if you think about it, we want our skinniest strips to go this way. So I'm going to turn this way, and I'm going to line up the stripe in the fabric with a line on the ruler, so when we do the straightening cut here and we subcut later, our stripe will be straight. I'm going to cut 4 2-inch strips, so I can actually do that with this Perfect 10 ruler, because I can cut at the 8-inch mark, the 6-inch mark, the 4-inch mark, and the 2-inch mark. Set this aside. This I'm going to move out of the way for a second. I'm going to turn my mat, and we're going to subcut this into 7.5 inches. So if you just kind of push this, they kind of go back together. Do a straightening line where you line the top up here and the side. Rotate your mat and subcut at the 7.5 inch line. So I'm actually going to do a straightening line here again and then redo that line because it looks like it moved a little bit. Just so that it is an accurate 7.5 inches. So these will be my O's, and for my P I need 2 2-inch by 2.5 inch. So I'm going to subcut these. So that's 2 inches. And I'm going to cut 2.5 inches twice, or you can cut a 5-inch and then subcut a 2.5 inch. And from here we have everything labeled on our design board, and we're ready to start piecing this block. We're going to take our fabric I squares and our fabric L squares, and we're going to put fabric H squares on one corner. So just like I did in all of the previous, I'm going to pin a square on one corner on all of these, and having a pin will really help it since you are going to be sewing from corner to corner. You'll be sewing on the bias, and it will help it stay in place. We're going to go to the sewing machine, and we are going to stitch from corner to corner diagonally. We're going to start with a 1.8 stitch length, and I have an open toe foot, and I'm just going to sew from corner to corner using this washi tape as a guide. I'm going to chain piece, meaning that I don't cut my thread between each unit. From here, just cut all of these apart, and by chain piecing we have saved a little bit of thread, and it makes it go a little bit quicker. We're going to trim 1/4 inch away from the seam. Now since it's in your seam allowance, it doesn't have to be perfect, so I just usually cut them individually one at a time. Now if you wanted to save time, you could stack 2 and cut them. You just want to be very careful that they're stacked exactly so that it comes out nice. We're just going to cut these all 1/4 inch away from the seam. From here, I'm going to set my seams, meaning that I'm just going to place my iron on the mat and let it sit about 5 seconds so that they get nice and hot and my seams lock together. Then I will press toward the black. Put your edge of your iron right on that seam so it gets nice and flat, and we can use a clapper once these are all nice and flat to get it even flatter. So now that it's still hot, just put the clapper right on top. The wood is going to absorb that heat and make it flatter. And then here you can actually put these right on top of the others. The next step, I'm going to take my larger 3-inch square from J and M. I'm gonna also grab my fabric C squares. From here, I'm gonna make half square triangles using my H200 paper. And you need 2 squares, but I'm actually gonna show you on this one, since you only need 1 each, a trick. So once I cut that off, just put your washi tape back on, and I'm gonna cut this in half because you only need half since you only need 1 of each. So from here, you can put your fabrics right sides together and put that paper on there, just making sure you have a little bit to cut off away from that edge. If you don't want to use triangle paper, all you have to do is follow the free pattern. From here, we're going to go to the sewing machine and stitch directly on the dashed lines. When you're working with triangle paper, it's good to shorten your stitch length. That will help your paper come off easier later. So I go down to like a 1.5, stitch directly on the dotted line. From here, we're going to make half square triangles so you can actually take a peek and see how it's going to look. We're going to cut on all of the solid lines. And using the paper really takes the thinking out of it. You just cut on the paper, super easy. Now to pull the paper off, you can either just pull or you can crease the paper and then pull. And it should come right off if you've used a short enough stitch length. From here, you're going to set your seam. Just let your iron sit about 5 seconds. You're going to press toward the red and just let that sit about 5 seconds. Just take your time. Put that under here so that it can flatten out. And the gray, we're going to press the opposite way toward the black. And just let that sit under there for just a second. This next step, we're going to combine the first step on page 2 with the second to last step on page 3, just to save time. So we're going to take our fabric P rectangles, lay them just like this. We're going to get 2 fabric E squares, put this one on this corner and this one on this corner. Get them nice and pinned. And we're going to go to the sewing machine with the pattern so that we don't make any mistakes. On the left one, we're going to stitch from the bottom left to the top right. And on the other one, we're going to stitch from the top left to the bottom right. Now we're going to move our stitch length back to a 1.8. I'm going to trim 1/4 inch away from my seam, and then we're going to press toward the black. So we're going to start building. We've got lots of units that we can make from what we made previously. So what I like to do is build a lot of these units on my design board. So right here, I'm going to start with this. So I'll put this way. I'll take my half square triangle, cut my little dog ears off since I forgot to do that earlier, and then place my half square triangle here, following this. And then add this. Now a similar unit to this is on the bottom of page 3, so we're going to follow that. This is going to go here, our half square triangle. You just pay attention to the direction that it goes. It's going to go here, and then this is going to go here. So we're making one of these units and one of these units. Now if we go back, we're going to make 2 of these. And what you're going to see is as we do this, if we do all of these kind of at the same time, it's going to save time. So we'll do 2 fabric G's, 2 fabric K's, and 2 fabric D's. And that is going to be 2 of those. And now we can go up here and even do 2 of these. So we'll just keep building, build as much as we can on this design board. We're going to make 2 that go this way. So this goes up. I'm going to add a fabric B and 1 more of these. Then we'll do this 1 more time. So that's why these design boards are great, because it's going to help you when you get to your sewing machine, because you're going to have everything laid out and you won't even have to think. So we've got those. So let's move to the next page and see if there's anything else we can build. we can build this one and this one. So we can take our remaining fabric G rectangles, put those right there, our fabric N rectangles, and our remaining fabric D rectangles. And so we've got those. And now we need to make one of these. We'll just kind of put it on top. So we've got this unit to make, this unit to make, these to make, this to make, and these to make. So what we'll do is just move all of this out of the way. And what I like to do before I go to the sewing machine is we're going to pin, and we will go back and forth to the sewing machine one piece at a time. So I'll meet you at the sewing machine after I have everything pinned. So I'm going to change away from the open toe foot to a 1/4 inch foot with a guide, and we're going to use a 1/4 inch seam going forward with everything on this board. And I'm not going to chain piece. I'm just going to open this back up to where I was and add the very next piece that was on the board. From here, I'm just going to take this in segments and press according to the pattern. On both of these, we're going to press away from the center. So I'll set my seams and press away from the center. And then from here, set this seam, press away from the center. All of these, we're going to press toward the long black piece. So we're going to press down. So I will set my seam, press, set my seam, press. These last 3 pieces will also be pressed away from the center. So when we were working on all of these pieces, this was more the top of the ribbon. So we're going to work on the bottom of the ribbon now. And we're going to build all of these. So we're going to lay our fabric A rectangles out. And on 2 of them, we're going to have a fabric J square on the left. And on 1 of them, we're going to have a fabric J square on the right. Now we're going to take our fabric M squares and place them on the missing sections. And when we sew these, we're going to sew just like that, but I am going to pin these in a second. Our last step is going to be our fabric O rectangles. And with those, we're going to put fabric E on each corner. And these we will also sew right here. So I'm going to pin all of this up, and then I'll meet you at the sewing table. I'm going to change the foot back to an open toe foot, and we're going to sew according to the pattern from corner to corner. From here, we're going to cut a 1/4 inch away from your stitched line. Discard these little triangles, and then we will press. I prefer to do these individually rather than stacked, just for accuracy. Sometimes I'm afraid I will just cut too far into the ones that go below it. So here I'm going to set my seams, and these are pretty easy because you just press toward the outside. And if you stack them and press, it only helps the ones on the bottom because they get even hotter and flatter. On this design board, I've laid out my units like the very last instruction on page 2. We're going to make 2 just like this. On the last step of the first column on page 3, we're going to make 1 unit that looks like this. So I've laid 2 out on this design board and 1 on this design board just so that I don't get them mixed up. From here, I'm going to put them right sides together and pin. And when we go to the sewing machine, we will sew this seam. And after we've sewn this seam, we will add the stripe on the bottom. So I'm going to switch the foot back to a 1/4 inch foot, stitch this seam, and then from here just open this back up, and at the bottom you're going to add the stripe and just pin that and keep going from your board to your machine. From here, this is really easy because when you're doing this, you can set both seams at one time. From here, you'll open it up and you need to finger press toward the top and the bottom and get it nice and flat, and then bring your iron across. Lay out all of your pieces, paying attention to color placement, and you're going to have 4 ribbons. Just pin them in each section and sew your row together nice and slow, and you're going to have a beautiful row 3. That's a gift wrap on the All the Trimmings Part 3. Join me next Monday for Part 4, and join me every Friday for my weekly live streams. See you there!